He said she was just a coworker. I saw the text. They planned a weekend getaway on my birthday. I booked the same hotel, same floor, next room. When they opened their door, I was already sipping champagne with someone he'd never dare cross. Revenge, no. Just business and a little fun. Claire, could you grab us some coffee while we finish up here? Derek didn't even look at me as he dismissed me from the boardroom. The boardroom I had designed in the company I had co-founded. I smiled tightly, nodded, and stepped out while the 6 men continued discussing our Asian expansion strategy. The expansion I had researched for months. The strategy one had drafted. The connections I had cultivated. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when Derek would proudly pull me forward at industry events, his hand warm against my back. This is Claire, my brilliant other half. The real brains behind Horizon Tech. He'd beam with genuine pride as I outlined our vision to potential investors. Back then we were equals. Partners in every sense. I remember the night that saved our company. 3 years ago, our first international deal was falling apart. Supply chain complications in Singapore threatened to sink us before we could even establish a foothold. Derek paced our apartment, panic mounting as midnight approached. I sat cross-legged on our living room floor, surrounded by spreadsheets and market projections, building an alternative import model from scratch. It's impossible, he had muttered around 2 a.m., collapsing onto the sofa. We need to call them tomorrow and back out. Give me 3 more hours, I said, not looking up from my laptop. By sunrise, I had reconstructed an entire supply network through Malaysia instead, with better margins and fewer regulatory hurdles. When I finally showed Derek, he lifted me into the air and spun me around our tiny living room. This is why I married you, he had whispered against my hair. You see solutions where others see walls. The board approved my plan unanimously. Our stock jumped 17% the following week. Now 3 years later, I stood in the break room making coffee for men who barely acknowledged me. The company had grown exponentially. We had offices in 4 countries, a workforce of over 300 people, an evaluation that made both of us paper millionaires. Somewhere during that climb, something fundamental had shifted. I carried the tray of coffees back into the meeting, distributing them silently. As I placed the last cup beside Derek, he glanced up briefly. Thanks, honey. Then turning to the board members, now as I was saying about the Jakarta projections. My research, my insights, now delivered in his voice. I took my seat at the far end of the table. I hadn't always sat there. Once my chair had been right beside his. Week by week, meeting by meeting, I had been subtly relocated. First across from him. Then diagonal. Now practically at the door. Derek, I interrupted as he was midway through explaining my own data to the room. I think we should address the regulatory concerns I mentioned in the brief. They could impact our Q3 targets. The room fell awkwardly silent. Derek's smile remained fixed, but something cold flashed behind his eyes. I've got this covered, Claire. We'll discuss those minor details after the main strategy is approved. Minor details. The legal complications that could cost us millions. Actually, I'd like to hear Mrs. Hamilton's thoughts, said Roland, our oldest board member. His eyes were kind. He remembered who I was. Derek smoothly interjected, we're running short on time. My wife has prepared some notes on the matter. I'll have them distributed later. My wife. Not co-founder. Not CEO. Not even Claire, the financial strategist who had saved them from disaster multiple times. Just my wife. As if my Harvard MBA and decade of experience were merely charming accessories to my marital status. After the meeting, I confronted him in his office. Once our shared office, now just his, with my desk relegated to a smaller room down the hall. You completely dismissed me in there, I said, closing the door behind me. Derek sighed, loosening his tie. Don't be dramatic, Claire. I was managing the room. Those investors don't respond well to too many voices. Those investors were about to make a massive mistake based on incomplete information. Information I tried to provide. Everything worked out fine, he said, barely looking up from his phone. We got the approval we needed. That's not the point, and you know it. He finally looked at me, impatience etched across his features. What exactly is the point, then? That I didn't let you derail a critical meeting with technical minutiae? I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. The point is that you're erasing me from my own company. "You're overthinking this," he said, the dismissal so casual it stung. "We're just growing, adapting. Different phases require different approaches." Different approaches. Like him taking solo flights to conferences we used to attend together. Like forgetting our anniversary last month. Like coming home past midnight with the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar. The signs had been accumulating for months. The distance. The dismissals. The way he'd check his phone and smile at messages that weren't from me. I wasn't blind, I just wasn't ready to connect the dots. That evening we hosted a company dinner at our home. As executives and their spouses mingled in our living room, I overheard Derek introducing me to a new client. "This is Claire, my wife. She keeps everything running smoothly behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. As if I were a stagehand rather than a lead actor in our success story. Something hardened inside me that night. As I served drinks and smiled at appropriate moments, I observed myself from a distance. This polished, efficient ghost of a woman I had become. Presentable. Polite. Powerless. 2 weeks later, Jenna Wallace joined our team as the new marketing director. Tall, ambitious, with sharp eyes that assessed everything as potential leverage. I watched how Derek leaned in slightly when she spoke, how his laugh became more genuine in her presence. During her first strategy presentation, she proposed rebranding efforts that directly contradicted my market research. Before I could speak, Derek was already endorsing her vision. "Brilliant perspective, Jenna. Fresh eyes are exactly what we needed." I sat silently watching this scene unfold like a spectator. Later, when I presented data showing why her approach might backfire in Asian markets, Derek pulled me aside. "Don't undermine the new talent," he whispered harshly. "It makes you look insecure." "It makes me look informed," I countered. "Her strategy ignores critical cultural factors." "You're being territorial. This isn't like you, Claire." But it was exactly like me. The real me, the one who built this company with meticulous attention to detail and uncompromising standards. The me he used to value. I noticed how Jenna would touch Derek's arm during conversations. How meetings with her always seemed to run late. How he'd mention her name at dinner. Casual references that felt deliberate, testing my reaction. Then came the night I asked him directly about their relationship. We were in our kitchen, the remains of a barely touched dinner between us. "You and Jenna seem close," I said carefully. He didn't look up from his phone. "She's just a coworker. Just a coworker." The lie wasn't what broke me, it was how little effort he put into it. He didn't even respect me enough to craft a convincing deception. In that moment, something inside me shifted, not in anger but in perfect crystalline clarity. I saw the complete architecture of what my life had become, and more importantly, I glimpsed what it could be instead. I didn't want to be seen anymore. Not as the patient wife, the shadow co-founder, the woman who forgives and forgets. I wanted to be remembered. And feared. That night I began planning my resurrection. My birthday was approaching. My 40th, a milestone that once felt significant. Derek and I had talked about celebrating in Bali or Kyoto years ago, back when we still shared dreams. But as the date drew closer, I expected nothing beyond a perfunctory dinner, if that. 3 days before, I casually mentioned it over breakfast. "Any plans for Friday? I thought maybe we could try that new French place downtown." Derek barely looked up from his tablet. "Can't. I'll be in meetings all day." No apology. No suggestion for an alternative. Not even the pretense of regret. "All night too?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He sighed, finally meeting my eyes with that look of practiced patience he'd perfected. "It's the Jakarta deal. You know how important this is. We've been working on it for months." I nodded, sipping my coffee. Of course. I understand. And I did understand, far more than he realized. The Jakarta deal had been finalized 2 weeks ago. I'd drafted the final terms myself. Later that morning, I needed to check our shared calendar for an upcoming vendor call. I logged into our synced accounts, a system we'd set up years ago for efficiency. Derek had grown careless with his digital footprint, assuming I'd never look. Why would I? I'd always been the trusting wife. A hotel reservation confirmation caught my eye. The Grand Metropolitan, booked for 2 nights starting on my birthday. The reservation wasn't for a business suite but for the panorama room, the same one where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. The coincidence felt too pointed to be accidental. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, a strange calm descended over me as I clicked through to his email, finding the booking confirmation. Guest names: Derek Hamilton and guest. In related emails I found his flight booking, not to Jakarta but a domestic flight. One person only. No meetings. No international deal. I hesitated for only a moment before opening his synced text backups. We'd connected our devices years ago when traveling internationally made communication difficult. Another relic of our partnership that he'd forgotten to dismantle. The messages appeared between him and an unsaved number. But I knew immediately who it belonged to. Hotels booked. The view is spectacular. Can't wait to wake up next to you. 2 whole days without interruptions. Pack the red dress. The one from Milan. I've arranged for champagne in the room. Private dinner Friday night. My birthday. The dinner I'd been denied would be served to another woman. No one will bother us. Told everyone I'm in Jakarta for the week. The casual efficiency of his deception struck me harder than the betrayal itself. There was no guilt in these messages, no hesitation. Just the confident planning of a man who believed himself untouchable. My name never appeared once. Not even a passing mention. No, I told Claire I'd be working, or, I need an excuse for missing her birthday. My existence hadn't even warranted acknowledgement in his infidelity. That absence cut deeper than any affair could. I stared at my screen for 10 minutes, my mind eerily calm, processing not just the betrayal but the calculated nature of it. Using our anniversary hotel for his tryst felt deliberate. A subconscious erasing of our shared history. With methodical precision I began taking screenshots, saving files, forwarding message backups to a private drive. I created an encrypted folder and labeled it with a date. No emotional name, nothing that would trigger suspicion. Just cold, hard documentation. The red dress comment confirmed who she was. Jenna had posted photos from the Milan business trip last month. Derek beside her at industry dinners, both smiling too broadly. One evening event featured her in a crimson dress that clung perfectly to her frame. I remembered liking the photo automatically before realizing Derek's hand was placed just slightly lower on her back than propriety would suggest. That night I prepared dinner as usual. Salmon with asparagus, Derek's favorite wine. He came home late, distracted. I watched him check his phone repeatedly, smiling at messages that clearly weren't work-related. "How was your day?" I asked, pouring him a glass of Cabernet. "Exhausting. The Jakarta negotiations are a nightmare." The lie slid so smoothly from his lips that I almost admired his confidence. Almost. He kissed my cheek absently before sitting down. "Sorry I'll miss your birthday. I'll make it up to you next weekend." I smiled. "Don't worry about it. Business comes first." After dinner, while Derek showered, I created a new folder on my personal laptop. I titled it simply, Exit Plan. Inside I placed the evidence of his affair, but that was just the beginning. I added our company bylaws, financial records, investment portfolios. I reviewed our prenuptial agreement, ironically drafted to protect my assets before the company took off. Derek had insisted on it, believing his potential exceeded mine. That document would now become my shield. I worked silently, efficiently, feeling strangely empowered. This wasn't a frantic reaction to heartbreak. This was strategic realignment. The next morning, after Derek left for the office, I called the Grand Metropolitan. The receptionist recognized my name immediately. "Mrs. Hamilton. It's been too long since you've stayed with us." "Yes, it has," I replied warmly. "I'm calling about a reservation for this weekend." "Of course. Your husband has booked the Panorama Suite for Friday and Saturday. Would you like to add any special requests?" "Actually, I'd like to book an additional room. Preferably next door to the Panorama." There was a brief pause. "I see. We have the executive suite available directly adjacent. Would that work?" "Perfect." The clerk didn't even blink. My name still carried VIP status at the hotel where we'd once been a power couple. If she found the request unusual, her professionalism masked it completely. After confirming the booking, I sat at my desk considering my next move. This wasn't just about catching Derek in the act. This was about reclaiming what he'd systematically taken from me. My company, my dignity, my future. For that, I needed leverage. And there was only one person who had both the power and the motivation to help me. I reached for my private phone, not the one Derek could track, and dialed a number I'd never used but had kept for emergencies. Ethan Rowe, our largest investor. The man Derek had consistently undermined, dismissed, and marginalized despite his crucial role in our funding. The financial genius Derek secretly feared. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting for this call for years. "Claire," he said simply. Not a question. He knew exactly who was calling and why. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice steady. His response was immediate, unhesitating. "Been waiting." The simplicity of our exchange carried the weight of shared understanding. Ethan had seen what I'd seen: the gradual corruption of the company we'd built, the erosion of values we'd once defended. He'd been watching, calculating, waiting for the precise moment to act. That moment had arrived. And it would begin in the room next door to my husband's affair. Ethan Rowe and I met the following morning at Petit Matin, a small French café tucked away in the business district. It wasn't where power players typically conducted meetings, which was precisely why we chose it. No industry colleagues, no prying eyes, just the soft clink of china and murmured conversations. He was already seated when I arrived, his attention focused on a leather portfolio. He didn't stand when I approached. Ethan never performed unnecessary courtesies, but his sharp eyes assessed me with newfound interest. "You look different," he noted as I sat across from him. "I am different," I replied. "Coffee." He ignored the offer. "I've been watching your husband make increasingly questionable decisions for 18 months. I assumed you were complicit or at least willfully ignorant. The accusation might have offended me once. Now it's simply confirmed my suspicions. Then why did you continue investing?" "Because I believe in what you built before he corrupted it." Ethan's directness was refreshing after years of Derek's smooth evasions. "And because I suspected you'd eventually wake up." I placed my tablet on the table between us. "I've been awake longer than you think. For the past year, I'd been documenting inconsistencies in our financial reporting. As Derek gradually excluded me from major decisions, I created back-channel access to our accounting systems. What began as self-preservation had evolved into something more troubling. 3 shell companies," I explained, opening files on my tablet. "Momentum Strategies, Pinnacle Solutions, and Vista Enterprises. All supposedly independent suppliers for our marketing division." Ethan's expression remained neutral as he reviewed the documents. "And same handwriting on the invoice approvals. Same IP addresses accessing their payment portals. Different logos, identical formatting down to the font choices." Now I had his full attention. I showed him how these companies had been billing us for strategic consulting services at increasingly inflated rates. The invoices had been consistently approved by Jenna Wallace and authorized for payment by Derek. I traced the banking information. I continued. All 3 companies deposit into related accounts. The money bounces through 4 banks before landing in an offshore account in the Caymans. "How long has this been happening?" 8 months. Started small, 10,000 here, 15 there. Now they're processing payments of 50,000 twice monthly." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, the closest he came to showing surprise. $500,000. And growing. He studied me carefully. "Why bring this to me instead of the board?" "Because Derek controls the board. And because you have resources I need." What I needed was a forensic auditor who could officially trace and document what I'd already discovered. Someone with credentials that couldn't be dismissed, whose findings would stand up to legal scrutiny. Someone outside Derek's sphere of influence. Ethan nodded once, decision made. "I know someone. Discreet, impeccable reputation." "How quickly can they work?" "Give me 3 days." We met again the following week. Same cafe, same table. This time Ethan brought a thumb drive. "Your suspicions were correct," he said without preamble. "The money trail is even more elaborate than you suspected, but it all leads back to Derek and your marketing director. They've created quite the scheme, sophisticated enough to fool standard audits, but not forensic investigation." I felt no satisfaction at being right. Only a cold fury that had been building for months. "The question is," Ethan continued, "what do you want to do with this information?" It was the crucial question. I could take this evidence to the authorities immediately. Derek would likely face criminal charges. The scandal would damage the company, but we'd survive. It would be swift, devastating justice. But that wasn't what I wanted. I want control, I said simply. Not revenge. Control. Ethan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then we need to be strategic. Our meetings became regular, twice weekly, always at the same cafe. Nothing intimate, just war councils disguised as brunch. We developed a rhythm, a shared language of corporate strategy and contingency planning. I suggested embedding a new clause in our corporate bylaws. If the CEO was found complicit in ethical misconduct or financial violations, the board could suspend them immediately pending investigation. No lengthy procedures, no protracted voting process. Immediate removal. He'll never agree to it, Ethan said. He won't read it, I countered. Derek signs whatever I put in front of him if it's more than 2 pages long. Always has. I drafted the policy in dense legalese, buried it within updates to our standard operating procedures. When I placed it on Derek's desk among a stack of quarterly compliance documents, he predictably sighed. Do I really need to go through all this now? The board needs these signed before the Jakarta announcement, I said, the lie coming easily. He scrawled his signature across the pages without reading a single line. You handle the boring stuff so well, he'd said with a dismissive smile. I filed the signed documents officially the next day. The trap was legally set. Ethan and I planned for every contingency. We anticipated internal backlash, which board members would remain loyal to Derek, which executives might resign in protest. We prepared for PR fallout, drafting statements emphasizing corporate governance and ethical standards. We even strategized how to spin Jenna's inevitable exit, not as a scandal but as a routine reorganization. What about the clients who are personally loyal to Derek? Ethan asked during one of our sessions. I've been managing those relationships from the shadows for years, I replied. Most don't even realize how much they've been dealing with me rather than him. And the media? They'll want the salacious angle, executive affair, corporate scandal. We control the narrative by focusing exclusively on the financial impropriety. The personal aspects remain private. I didn't want Derek jailed or publicly humiliated for his affair. That was between us. What I wanted was to dismantle the power structure he'd built. His reputation as a visionary, his control over my company, his inflated pride. I wanted him removed like the cancer he had become in the organization we'd created together. Ethan studied me with something approaching respect. Most people in your position would want blood. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about surgical extraction. Clean, precise, effective. The plan crystallized over those weeks of careful plotting. We would confront Derek with the evidence at the next board meeting, scheduled for the Monday after my birthday. The timing wasn't coincidental. While he was indulging in his weekend tryst, I would be finalizing his professional demise. But as the date approached, I realized something was missing. The financial evidence was damning but clinical. The personal betrayal existed in a separate compartment of my mind. They needed to converge. I want to witness his reaction, I told Ethan during our final planning session. Not just in the boardroom. I want to see the moment he realizes everything is collapsing. Ethan considered this. You've booked the room next to theirs. Yes. Then perhaps I should join you there. His voice remained professional, but there was a glint in his eyes. For maximum impact. The idea took shape between us. Not just financial evidence but a physical confrontation. Not just professional consequences but personal ones. The perfect convergence of every betrayal. The operation date? Ethan asked. My birthday, I confirmed. This Friday. Friday morning dawned clear and bright. My 40th birthday. No calls, no messages from Derek. His silence confirmed everything. I packed my overnight bag methodically, selecting each item with purpose. The pearl gray suit I'd worn when we signed our first major contract. The diamond earrings he'd given me on our 10th anniversary. Small symbolic touches that would register in his subconscious. I arrived at the Grand Metropolitan 2 days earlier than Derek's planned check-in. The doorman recognized me immediately. Mrs. Hamilton. What a pleasure to see you again. The front desk manager approached with a warm smile. We have you all set up in the executive suite, but I took the liberty of upgrading you to our diplomat suite. It's on the same floor as your other reservation, but offers a better view of the park. Same floor, next door to Derek's room, exactly as planned, but with an unexpected upgrade. Perfect. That's very kind. Thank you. As the manager processed my check-in, I noticed a young bellhop watching from nearby. His name tag read Michael. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, the reaction of someone who recognized a delicate situation. He had likely seen the reservation list, noted the separate bookings under the same last name. When he escorted me to my room, I decided to be direct. As he placed my bag on the luggage stand, I withdrew a crisp $100 bill. Michael, I have a small favor to ask. He hesitated only briefly before accepting the bill. How can I help, Mrs. Hamilton? I'd like to know when my husband checks in tomorrow. A simple text to this number would be sufficient. I handed him a card with my private cell number. Understanding flickered across his face, but his professionalism remained intact. Of course, ma'am. Anything else? That's all for now. Thank you. After he left, I surveyed the suite with a tactical eye. The space was elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, but I wasn't there to admire the view. I was staging a scene, crafting the perfect tableau for the confrontation to come. I spent Thursday evening and Friday morning transforming the suite. The furniture was rearranged slightly, the marble coffee table positioned to be visible from the doorway, the sofa angled to create an intimate conversation area. I ordered specific items from room service. A premium bottle of Dom Perignon chilling in an ice bucket, 2 crystal champagne flutes placed precisely on the table. Low lighting was essential. Bright enough to be clearly visible from the hallway, dim enough to create an atmosphere of conspiracy. I selected background music with care. Nothing romantic, but something sophisticated and subtle that would carry into the corridor when the door was open. Every detail was a calculated bullet aimed at Derek's psyche. By Friday afternoon, the stage was set. I received a text from Michael, package arriving at 6 p.m. Derek was checking in early, likely eager to prepare for his evening with Jenna. I messaged Ethan, timeline accelerated. 6:30. His response was immediate, confirmed. I dressed with deliberate care, a black dress that was elegant without being provocative. Professional makeup, hairstyled in the sleek updo I wore for major business presentations. The armor of a CEO, not a scorned wife. At 6:27, a discreet knock announced Ethan's arrival. He entered carrying a leather briefcase, his expression as impassive as ever. They're here, he said without preamble. Checked in 12 minutes ago. The woman went to the hotel bar while he inspects the room. Of course, Derek would want to ensure everything was perfect before bringing Jenna up. His predictability had become my advantage. Ethan opened his briefcase on the coffee table, extracting a thick manila envelope sealed with tamper-evident tape. 50 pages of evidence, notarized and time-stamped. Bank records, transaction histories, corporate filings for the shell companies. The forensic accountant's full report. Everything. We spread the documents across the table, arranging them to be visible but not obviously displayed. Evidence hiding in plain sight. The board members have been notified of an emergency meeting Monday morning, Ethan continued. The agenda doesn't specify details, but I've spoken personally with the 4 members we need for a majority vote. And they're prepared to act? They're prepared to listen. The evidence will do the rest. We reviewed everything one last time. Export manifests that revealed the fraudulent billing schemes, forensic accounting reports tracing the money flow, board protocols for emergency suspension. The legal framework was airtight. The policy change I'd sneaked past Derek would be his undoing. Our interaction remained strictly professional. No touching, no flirting. Despite what Derek would soon assume upon seeing us together, Ethan and I weren't lovers. We were co-conspirators united by a common goal. The intimacy between us was intellectual, not physical. At 7:15, voices drifted from the hallway. Laughter, light and flirtatious. The distinctive click of Jenna's heels on marble. They're coming, I whispered, moving to the door. I opened it just enough for a slice of light to spill into the hallway, not fully ajar but clearly intentional. From the corridor one would glimpse the champagne, the papers, 2 figures in intimate consultation. The perfect visual ambiguity. Ethan positioned himself beside me, partially visible from the hallway. Remember, he murmured, no matter what he says, let him speak first. The power is in his reaction. I nodded, heart steady. This wasn't about emotion. It was about execution. The voices grew closer. Keys jangled as Derek unlocked his suite. "Wait until you see the view," he was saying. "Worth every penny." Jenna's response was lost as I focused on controlling my breathing. The moment was approaching. The culmination of months of planning, years of diminishment, a lifetime of underestimation. I stood motionless, calculating the exact second when Derek would notice my partially open door. The lighting was designed to catch peripheral vision. Not obvious but impossible to miss. "After dinner I thought we could," Derek's voice cut off abruptly. He'd seen it. I didn't breathe. I waited. One beat. Two. Silence hung in the hallway. Then cautious footsteps approached. The door across from mine opened wider as Derek stepped into view. Our eyes locked through the deliberate gap I'd created. Behind him, Jenna appeared, her scarlet dress exactly as promised in the texts. Her hand rested possessively on Derek's arm until she registered the frozen tableau before her. The moment crystallized exactly as I'd choreographed. Derek's face transformed in seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, the dawning horror of understanding as he noticed Ethan beside me. Their expressions changed forever in that instant. All color drained from Derek's face. Jenna's perfect composure cracked, her professional mask slipping to reveal naked anxiety. I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. Not triumphant, not angry, but calm and knowing. A smile that said, "I see you. I've always seen you. And now you finally see me too." The silence in the hallway stretched for 3 full seconds. Derek's face cycled through emotions like a kaleidoscope. Shock, confusion, anger, and finally fear. Jenna stepped behind him, visibly rattled. She attempted a smile that collapsed before it fully formed. "Claire." Derek choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. With deliberate slowness, I raised my champagne glass in a mocking toast. "Happy birthday to me." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and gleaming. Beyond him, I could see Jenna's perfectly manicured hand trembling against the door frame. She hadn't expected this, to be confronted directly, to have her affair exposed through such a precisely orchestrated moment. Ethan stood from where he'd been seated, straightening his tie in an unhurried motion. His expression revealed nothing as he collected a document from the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "We'll need you at tomorrow's board meeting," he said. Not a request. A command. Derek's spine stiffened at Ethan's voice. The implications were registering now. Not just the personal betrayal, but the professional alliance I had formed with the investor he had systematically undermined. His eyes darted between us, calculating, reassessing the power dynamics that had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. He stepped forward, one hand extended in a placating gesture. "Claire, this isn't what it looks like." The desperation in his denial almost made me laugh. After months of gaslighting and dismissal, he still believed I would accept whatever narrative he constructed. I allowed myself a small, contained smile. "No, Derek. It's worse." His brow furrowed, confusion momentarily overtaking panic. Before he could respond, I stepped back and closed the door with a definitive click. The lock engaged with a sound that felt like punctuation, the period at the end of a marriage, a partnership, an era. Inside the room, I moved calmly to the sofa and sat down. Ethan remained standing, watching me with something approaching respect. "Your hands aren't shaking," he observed. I looked down, surprised to find he was right. Despite the confrontation, my body remained steady. No trembling fingers, no racing heart, no surge of adrenaline. Just a profound sense of clarity. "I've imagined that moment 100 different ways," I said quietly. The reality was better. Ethan nodded once, understanding. "Now we prepare for tomorrow." We spent the next 3 hours refining our strategy for the emergency board meeting. Outside, we could hear Derek and Jenna arguing in harsh, hushed tones before they eventually left. Their evening plans, the romantic dinner, the champagne, the carefully selected red dress, all rendered meaningless by 7 seconds of unplanned confrontation. I slept soundly that night for the first time in months. No anxiety dreams, no waking to check my phone, no rehearsing conversations in my head. Just deep, restful sleep, the kind that comes with absolute certainty. The board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. I arrived at 7:15, dressed in a charcoal suit with a single strand of pearls, authoritative without being aggressive. Ethan was already there, speaking quietly with two board members in the corner. They nodded deferentially as I entered. By 7:45, everyone had arrived except Derek and Jenna. The board members clustered in small groups, their conversations unnaturally subdued. They knew something significant was coming, even if they didn't understand exactly what. At 7:59, Derek walked in alone. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by a stiff, measured gait. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed by sleepless night. He took his seat at the head of the table without greeting anyone. Jenna didn't show. Her absence spoke volumes. As the meeting began, Ethan distributed slim folders to each board member. Before we proceed with today's agenda, there's an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. Derek stared straight ahead as the room collectively examined the contents. The files contained only essential information: bank records, transaction logs, forensic accounting reports. Clean, clinical evidence of financial misconduct. No one spoke as they reviewed the documents. No gasps, no accusations, no dramatic outbursts. Just the soft rustling of papers and the occasional tap of a pen. When everyone had finished reading, I rose from my seat. All eyes turned to me, including Derek's. For once he couldn't look away. As outlined in the corporate bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, Subsection B, which was unanimously approved by this board, evidence of financial impropriety requires immediate suspension of any executive found complicit pending full investigation. My voice remained steady, professional. This wasn't personal, not in this room. This was governance. The evidence before you clearly establishes that Derek Hamilton authorized payments to fraudulent vendors, resulting in company funds being diverted to offshore accounts. These actions constitute a direct violation of our ethical standards and fiduciary responsibilities. I paused, allowing the information to settle. Not a single question was raised. The evidence was too clear, too comprehensive to dispute. Therefore, I am invoking the emergency clause. Derek Hamilton is suspended from all duties and authorities as CEO, effective immediately. Derek's knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of his chair, but he remained silent. What defense could he offer against his own signature, his own banking records? During this period, I continued, I will resume control of operations until a vote for permanent leadership can be held following the completion of a full audit. The room fell silent. I didn't rush to fill the void, didn't seek immediate approval. I simply stood there, confident in the framework I had built. After what felt like minutes but was likely only seconds, Roland, our senior board member, cleared his throat. I believe the evidence speaks for itself. I motioned to approve the emergency succession as outlined. Seconded, said Vivian Chin, another board veteran. The vote was swift, unanimous. Not out of loyalty to me but out of self-preservation. No one wanted to be associated with what Derek had done. Effective immediately, I said, collecting my papers. All operational decisions will route through my office. We will issue a statement to key stakeholders by noon. Throughout the proceedings, Derek never spoke a word. No defense, no denial, no desperate attempt to regain control. He simply sat there, watching as his career imploded in 9 minutes of clinical corporate procedure. As the meeting adjourned, his eyes found mine across the table. In them I saw something I had never witnessed before. Fear. Raw, undisguised fear. Not just of losing his position but of losing his identity. Without the title, without the authority, who was he? I didn't return his gaze with anger or triumph. I offered nothing. No emotion, no reaction, no acknowledgement of our shared history. I simply stood, gathered my belongings, and walked out of the boardroom with measured steps. Not a single glance behind me. As I moved down the hallway toward what was now my office again, I heard the hushed conversations begin. The speculation, the shock, the inevitable realignment of loyalties. None of it mattered. The transition of power was complete, not through drama or confrontation, but through methodical execution of the systems Derek himself had signed into existence. The empire had changed hands in less than 10 minutes. The aftermath unfolded like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Precise, predictable, expanding outward with mathematical certainty. Derek's desperation grew as each day solidified my position. First came the calls. hourly, then half-hourly, then every few minutes until I instructed IT to block his number from the company system. His emails followed a predictable arc: shock, denial, anger, bargaining. The final one arrived 3 days after the board meeting. "Claire, you've made your point. You've humiliated me. You've taken everything. What more do you want? We built this together. You can't just erase me." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. By the end of the week, he'd enlisted his mother, a woman who had barely spoken to me in years, to plead his case. She arrived unannounced at my office, eyes red-rimmed but chin held high. "He's devastated, Claire," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "I've never seen him like this. I'm sorry you've been drawn into this, Margaret." My tone was gentle but firm. "But this isn't a personal vendetta. Financial impropriety of this magnitude cannot be ignored. He made a mistake." "No." I slid a folder across the desk. "A mistake is accidental. This was systematic. 8 months of deliberate fraud." She didn't open the folder. He didn't need to. The truth was written across her face. She already knew. Mother's intuition, perhaps, or simply the recognition that the son she'd raised was capable of exactly this kind of calculated selfishness. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "The company continues. The audit proceeds. Derek's involvement will depend on the findings." "And your marriage?" I met her gaze directly. "That ended long before any of this happened." After she left, I instructed security to update the visitor protocols. No more unannounced guests, regardless of family connections. Then I blocked Derek's personal email, his social media accounts, even the messaging app we'd once used for quick notes throughout the day. Complete digital excision. Jenna resigned 3 days later. No dramatic exit, no threats of legal action, just a brief, formal letter submitted through HR. Rumor circulated that she had left the industry altogether, accepting a position at a nonprofit on the opposite coast. I neither confirmed nor denied these rumors. Her departure was a footnote, not a chapter. My focus remained on rebuilding what Derek had nearly destroyed. The company needed clear, decisive leadership to weather the transition. I provided it without fanfare or dramatic declarations. My first symbolic act was subtle but unmistakable. I had Derek's corner office repainted, from the masculine charcoal he'd selected to a clean, neutral white. His heavy mahogany desk was replaced with a sleek glass one. His nameplate disappeared from the door, replaced by a simple CO office. No name needed. Everyone knew who occupied the space now. As the changes took effect, an unexpected phenomenon emerged. Staff morale soared. Productivity increased across departments. Meeting attendance reached perfect levels. Projects that had stalled for months suddenly found momentum. In private conversations, the truth emerged. Everyone had seen the cracks in Derek's leadership. The favoritism, the hasty decisions, the credit-taking. But no one had dared speak, fearing his volatility and vindictiveness. My calm, methodical approach provided the stability they had been craving. Under Ethan's and my joint leadership, we implemented strategic changes that should have happened years earlier. We restructured the board, bringing in 2 industry veterans who challenged our thinking in productive ways. We cut product lines that had been losing money for years but that Derek had refused to abandon due to personal attachment. We rebranded our core offerings with messaging that resonated in international markets. The results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, revenue climbed 18%, our strongest growth period since the company's founding. We secured 3 major European contracts that Derek had pursued unsuccessfully for years, clients who responded to our renewed commitment to transparency and innovative solutions. Throughout this period of transformation, I maintained a deliberate public composure. No triumphant LinkedIn posts. No cryptic quotes on Instagram. No interviews discussing the dramatic leadership change. I simply worked, allowing results to speak louder than any personal narrative could. The legal aftermath proceeded with similar efficiency. The forensic audit confirmed everything we had discovered and more. Derek faced serious consequences: financial penalties, legal restrictions, reputation damage. But I didn't push for criminal charges. That had never been my goal. Justice, not vengeance. Correction, not destruction. 7 months after the board meeting, Ethan stopped by my office late one evening. I was reviewing quarterly projections, preparing for the following day's investor call. He placed a bottle of wine on my desk, the same vintage we had served at our first major client celebration. Attached was a simple note card, to the queen who never needed a crown. He left without further comment, our professional alliance continuing its effective course. We weren't friends, probably never would be, but we shared a mutual respect that served the company well. That night I took the wine home to my new apartment, a sleek, minimalist space 40 floors above the city. I opened the bottle and stepped onto my private balcony, watching as the city lights emerged against the darkening sky. I toasted alone, not out of loneliness but out of choice. The solitude felt earned, purposeful. As I sipped the rich Cabernet, I reflected on the journey. I had never wanted to destroy Derek despite what he might believe. I had simply wanted him to understand a fundamental truth he had forgotten. I wasn't just his wife, an accessory to be displayed and dismissed. I was the empire, the architect, the vision. He had tried to reduce me to a shadow while he stood in the spotlight. He had tried to claim sole ownership of what we had built together. He had tried to cheat the very foundation that supported his success. Now he could live in the ruins of the narrative he had constructed, the myth of the self-made man, the visionary leader, the irreplaceable genius. That story had collapsed under the weight of his own actions, not mine. I would continue building the legacy he had nearly destroyed, brick by methodical brick. But now my name would be carved at the top, not out of ego but out of truth. Not as revenge but as restoration of the natural order. The company flourished not because I had ruined Derek but because he had ruined himself. All I had done was reveal the truth that had been there all along, hidden beneath layers of deception and self-delusion. I finished my wine as the city settled into its nighttime rhythm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth. The past was finished. The future belonged to me. And this time I would remain visible. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Claire raised her glass and said, "Happy birthday" to me, while Derek stood frozen in shock. What was your favorite moment from Claire's masterful takedown? Drop it in the comments below. Want more stories of brilliant women reclaiming their power? Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. The next corporate queen's revenge might be even more satisfying.